Hello friend, you are welcome. I am the creator of Translando. I have made this video especially for you.
I never thought the quiet rhythm of my marriage would one day be interrupted by something so unexpected, something that would test every idea I had about love, identity, and the person I had chosen to share my life with. My husband, Daniel, had always been a steady presence. He was the kind of man who kept his promises, who folded his shirts with precision and remembered the little things that made me feel seen. We weren't a flashy couple. Our lives were simple. Weekend coffee dates, long evening walks, the occasional movie night when work allowed. But sometimes the quietest lives hide the deepest secrets, and I was about to learn that the person sleeping beside me carried a truth that would change everything I thought I knew. It started subtly, the way big changes often do. A new softness to his voice when he spoke late at night. A lingering glance in the mirror after a shower. First I chalked it up to stress. Daniel had been working long hours, and I assumed the quiet introspection was just fatigue. But then there were the packages. Small boxes arriving at odd hours, each one signed for and tucked away before I could ask what was inside. He'd give me a quick smile and say it was just work stuff, but there was always a flicker in his eyes, something between excitement and fear. One evening, I found myself awake long after Daniel had gone to bed. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. I padded into the living room to grab a glass of water and noticed a faint light spilling from the small office we shared. The door was slightly open. Curiosity tugged at me. I pushed it gently and peered inside. Daniel sat at the desk, his back to me, scrolling through something on the computer. On the screen was a page filled with images of transformation, makeup tutorials, clothing guides, and articles about gender expression. My breath caught in my throat. I stepped back before he could notice me, my heart racing as questions swirled like a storm. The next morning I watched him more carefully. His shirt fit a little differently, the fabric pulling across his chest in a way I hadn't seen before. Maybe it was the laundry, maybe I was imagining things. But when he reached for his coffee mug, I saw it. A subtle curve where before there had been none. My mind flashed back to the late-night browsing, the packages, the quiet smiles. I wanted to ask, but the words stuck like a stone in my throat. Instead, I stirred my tea and tried to act normal, though my pulse betrayed me. Days passed in a haze of half-questions and nervous glances. I began noticing more tiny details that, when pieced together, painted a picture I wasn't sure I was ready to see. The faint shimmer of clear nail polish on his fingertips. The gentle scent of a floral lotion that lingered on his skin. One evening, while folding laundry, I found a soft sports bra tucked neatly between his shirts. I held it in my hands, the fabric light and warm from the dryer, and felt a mixture of confusion and awe. This wasn't just experimentation. Something deeper was happening, something he hadn't yet trusted me to share. That night, as we lay in bed, I turned to face him. The room was dark except for the glow of the streetlight filtering through the curtains. "Daniel," I whispered, my voice barely audible. He shifted slightly but didn't answer. "I know something's going on," I continued, my heart pounding. "You don't have to hide it from me." There was a long pause. Then he exhaled, a slow, trembling sound that carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken fears. "I didn't mean for you to find out like this," he said finally, his voice raw. "I've been exploring something about myself. Something I've felt for a long time but didn't know how to explain. I've been trying to understand who I really am." His words hung in the air, fragile and electric. My mind raced, but my heart softened. I reached for his hand, feeling the tension in his grip. "You can tell me," I said. "Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together." He turned toward me then, and in the dim light, I saw a flicker of relief cross his face. "I've started hormone therapy," he confessed. "It's why my chest looks different. I didn't know how to tell you. I was afraid you'd see me differently. That you wouldn't love me anymore." My breath caught. Hormone therapy. The words felt heavy, loaded with meaning. I thought of the small changes I'd noticed. The softness, the curves, the quiet confidence. It all made sense now. 1,000 questions burned inside me, but stronger than the questions was a deep, surprising calm. I squeezed his hand and whispered, "You're still you. And I love you." Daniel's eyes glistened in the faint light, and for the first time in weeks, I saw him smile without fear. The days that followed Daniel's confession felt like stepping into a world I had never imagined, a world where every glance, every word carried new layers of meaning. I woke up the next morning to the sound of him in the bathroom, the faint splash of water and the soft rustle of clothing. When he emerged, I noticed the way his shoulders curved slightly inward, a subtle but unmistakable difference in the way he carried himself. He wasn't hiding anymore. There was a quiet vulnerability in his eyes, but also a flicker of something else, something almost like relief. Over breakfast, we sat across from each other in the gentle morning light. The silence between us wasn't heavy. It was thoughtful, like the air itself was waiting to see what we would say next. Finally, I reached across the table and covered his hand with mine. "Thank you for trusting me," I said softly. "I know that couldn't have been easy." He looked down at our intertwined fingers and gave a small nod. "It's something I've wanted to tell you for years," he admitted. "But every time I tried, I'd hear this voice in my head telling me to stay quiet. I was afraid of losing you, of breaking everything we built together." His words broke something open inside me. I thought of all the nights we'd spent side by side, the quiet moments when he'd seemed distant, the way he sometimes stared at his reflection with a sadness I couldn't name. "You were never going to lose me," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. "I married you because of who you are, not because of some idea of who you're supposed to be." Daniel's eyes softened, and for a moment, he looked almost weightless, as though a lifetime of secrets had been lifted from his shoulders. But the path ahead wasn't simple. That afternoon, he invited me into his hidden world for the first time. He opened the closet in our spare bedroom, a place I'd never paid much attention to, and revealed a carefully organized collection of clothing, fabrics, and accessories that shimmered with quiet beauty. Soft sweaters in muted pastels, delicate blouses, and a pair of breast forms that explained the subtle changes I'd noticed. I stepped closer, running my fingers along the smooth fabric of a pale blue dress. "These are beautiful," I said, my voice filled with genuine wonder. "They make me feel whole," Daniel replied. "When I wear them, it's like the noise in my head quiets down. I feel like I can finally breathe." There was no shame in his voice now, only a fragile honesty that drew me closer. I picked up a small bottle of foundation from the shelf and held it up. "Would you show me how you use this?" "Yes." His eyes widened slightly, then softened with gratitude. "You really want to know?" "I want to understand," I said simply. That evening, we transformed our bedroom into a quiet studio. Daniel sat at the edge of the bed, a small mirror propped up on the nightstand, while I watched as he carefully applied each layer of makeup. His movements were deliberate, almost meditative. He explained each step, how the foundation softened his features, how a touch of contour added dimension, how a swipe of mascara could change the way his eyes caught the light. I listened, captivated, as his face slowly shifted into something both familiar and new. It wasn't a mask. It was a revelation. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes shimmering beneath perfectly shaped brows, I felt a rush of emotion I couldn't quite name. He looked radiant, not because he resembled someone else, but because he looked more like himself than I had ever seen. "You're beautiful," I whispered before I could stop myself. Daniel blinked, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You really think so?" "I know so." We spent the rest of the night talking, about his fears, his hopes, the small victories, and the heavy doubts. He told me about the first time he'd tried on a dress as a teenager, how it had felt like coming home and how quickly that joy had been replaced by guilt. He spoke of years spent hiding, of the slow realization that this wasn't a phase but a truth he could no longer deny. Each word was a piece of a puzzle I hadn't known existed, and with every piece, the image of the man I loved grew clearer, more complete. As the clock crept past midnight, I found myself holding him close, the scent of his floral lotion mingling with the faint powder of makeup. I felt no fear, only a deep, abiding love that transcended the boundaries of expectation. This wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one that required courage from both of us. The next morning, I woke to find Daniel standing by the window, the soft light of dawn outlining his figure. He was wearing the pale blue dress I'd admired the night before. His hair brushed neatly, his shoulders relaxed. When he turned to face me, there was no hesitation in his eyes. "I don't want to hide anymore," he said quietly. "Not from you, not from myself." I rose from the bed and walked toward him, my heart full and steady. "Then we won't," I replied. "Not anymore." We stood there in the quiet morning, hand in hand, two people stepping into a future that was uncertain but ours to shape. And for the first time I realized that love isn't about holding someone to the person they used to be. It's about walking beside them as they become who they truly are. The following weeks felt like a quiet unfolding, as though a hidden world had been waiting just beyond the edges of our everyday life, ready to bloom the moment Daniel stopped hiding. Each day carried small discoveries, moments that might have seemed ordinary to anyone else but held immense meaning for us. There was the first time he answered the door wearing a soft cardigan that revealed the gentle curves of his chest, the first time he walked beside me through the park with his nails painted a subtle rose pink. No one stared. No one whispered. And yet every step felt like a triumph. At first I worried about how others would react. Neighbors, co-workers, even close friends. But Daniel's quiet confidence began to change something in me. I realized that my fear was just an echo of the shame he had carried for so long. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, I confessed my worries to him. "What if people don't understand?" asked my voice low. He looked at me with a calm steadiness that surprised me. "I've spent most of my life trying to be what people expect," he said. "I can't do it anymore. If someone can't accept this part of me, maybe they were never really seeing me at all." His words settled over me like a gentle truth. I took his hand and squeezed it, feeling a new strength in both of us. With every passing day, his body began to change in subtle, fascinating ways. The hormones softened the angles of his face, smoothing the sharp lines into gentle curves. His skin grew warmer, almost luminous, and his chest developed a fullness that no longer required forms or padding. Sometimes I would catch him standing in front of the mirror, tracing the outline of his new silhouette with quiet wonder. There was a tenderness in the way he observed himself, a reverence for the slow transformation of his own body. One night, as we prepared for bed, he turned to me with a nervous smile. "Would you help me choose something to wear tomorrow?" he asked. "Something that feels right?" I followed him into the spare bedroom where his growing wardrobe filled the closet like a secret garden of fabrics and colors. My fingers danced over soft knits, delicate blouses, and dresses in shades of lavender, cream, and rose. After a moment, I pulled out a pale peach top with a subtle lace trim. "This one," I said. "It's soft, but it shines in the light." He held it against himself, his smile widening. "It's perfect." The next day we went to a small cafe downtown, a place we'd visited countless times before. But this time felt different. Daniel wore the peach top, paired with tailored jeans and a light scarf that caught the breeze. I watched as he walked beside me, his posture relaxed, his eyes bright. For the first time, there was no trace of the man who once shrank beneath the weight of unspoken truths. He was present, alive, and completely himself. Inside the cafe, a young barista with a kind smile took our order without hesitation, using the name Daniel still preferred. There was no awkward pause, no questioning glance, just the simple kindness of someone treating us like any other couple. We sat by the window, sipping our drinks as sunlight filtered through the glass, and I felt a quiet joy swell in my chest. This was what freedom looked like. Not grand gestures or loud declarations, but the ordinary moments where fear no longer dictated the terms of our lives. Later that week, Daniel shared another surprise. "There's a support group," he said hesitantly, "for people going through transitions." They meet every Thursday evening. I've been thinking about going, but I'd like you to come with me. If you're comfortable. I didn't hesitate. Of course I'll come. That Thursday, we entered a small community center tucked between two brick buildings on a quiet street. Inside, a circle of chairs held a handful of people, some smiling, some shy, each carrying their own stories. As we introduced ourselves, I watched Daniel carefully. At first, his voice trembled, but as he spoke, a steady strength emerged. He talked about years of silence, about fear and self-discovery, and about the love that had helped him find the courage to finally live as himself. When he finished, the group responded with warm smiles and gentle applause. After the meeting, as we walked back to the car, he turned to me with eyes that shimmered in the streetlight. I didn't realize how much I needed that, he said. To hear other people's stories, to know I'm not alone. I slipped my arm through his and rested my head on his shoulder. You're not alone, I said softly. Not now, not ever. At home that night, we sat together in comfortable silence. The world outside felt vast and unpredictable, but inside our small house, everything was clear. We had crossed a threshold, one that couldn't be undone, and neither of us wanted to go back. As the weeks turned into months, Daniel's transformation continued in ways both visible and unseen. His body softened, yes, but so did the walls he had once built around his heart. He laughed more easily, spoke more freely, and carried himself with a lightness that made me realize how heavy his burden had been. And as he grew into himself, I found myself changing too. My understanding of love deepened, expanding beyond the rigid definitions I'd once held. Love wasn't about who fit a certain image or followed a certain script. It was about standing beside someone as they became the fullest version of themselves. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, Daniel turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever wonder what comes next?" he asked. I thought about it for a moment, listening to the distant sound of crickets. "Not really," I said. "Because whatever it is, we'll face it together." He smiled, a soft, radiant smile that carried the promise of countless tomorrows. And in that quiet moment, I knew with absolute certainty that no matter how much he changed, the heart of who we were would remain unshakable. The arrival of spring marked a turning point in Daniel's journey, and in ours as a couple. The cold, gray days of winter had been a time of quiet change. Soft sweaters, subtle shifts in routine, and long nights spent talking about feelings we had both buried for years. But as the days grew warmer and the air filled with the scent of blooming flowers, something in Daniel began to blossom too. He carried himself differently now, shoulders back, eyes bright, as though the world around him had finally begun to match the warmth growing inside. One Saturday morning, sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows while we prepared breakfast together. Daniel wore a pale yellow blouse and light blue jeans, his hair falling softly around his face. I watched as he moved with an ease I had never seen before, his laughter filling the room like music. Months ago, I might have worried about what our neighbors would think if they saw him through the window. But now I felt only pride. This was the person I loved, radiant, brave, and finally free. As we sat down to eat, Daniel reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "There's something I've been thinking about," he said, his voice steady but gentle. "I know we've been taking things step by step, but I've been feeling ready to share this part of myself with more people. Not just you, not just the support group. I want to tell my family." The words hung in the air between us. His parents lived a few hours away, loving but traditional, the kind of people who still mailed holiday cards and used paper maps on road trips. I knew this would not be easy. "Are you sure you're ready?" I asked carefully. He nodded, a quiet determination in his eyes. "I don't want to hide anymore. They deserve to know who I really am, even if it's hard." We spent the next few days preparing for the visit, talking through possible questions, rehearsing answers, and sharing our fears late into the night. I could feel the tension in Daniel's shoulders as we drove toward his childhood home, the familiar landscape rolling past the car windows like a memory. I reached over and took his hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. No matter what happens, I said, we're in this together. When we arrived, his parents greeted us with warm smiles, oblivious to the storm of emotions beneath our calm appearances. We shared a quiet dinner, the small talk of weather and work masking the truth waiting to surface. Finally, after the dishes were cleared and the room grew still, Daniel took a deep breath. There's something important I need to tell you, he began, his voice trembling just slightly. He looked at his parents, then at me before continuing. I've spent most of my life trying to be someone I'm not. But I can't do that anymore. I'm transitioning. I've started hormone therapy, and I'm exploring who I truly am. I hope you can accept me for who I am becoming. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the faint ticking of a clock on the wall. His mother's eyes widened, her fork frozen halfway to her plate. His father leaned back, his brow furrowed. My heart pounded as I waited for their response. Finally, his mother set down her fork and reached across the table, her hand trembling as it found Daniel's. You're our child, she said softly, tears welling in her eyes. We love you. That will never change. His father nodded, though his expression remained guarded. I don't understand all of this, he admitted, his voice gruff. But you're still my kid. That's what matters. Relief washed over Daniel's face like a tide. Tears filled his eyes as he gripped his mother's hand. I felt my own throat tighten, overwhelmed by the quiet power of acceptance. On the drive home, Daniel leaned back against the seat, his eyes shining. I was so scared, he whispered. But they didn't turn away. They still love me. They always will, I said, squeezing his hand. And so will I. The weeks after that visit felt lighter, as though a great weight had been lifted from Daniel's heart. He began sharing his truth with close friends, each conversation strengthening his resolve and deepening his sense of self. Not every reaction was perfect. Some were awkward, some hesitant, but each step brought him closer to the life he deserved. One evening, as we walked through the park beneath a sky streaked with pink and gold, Daniel turned to me with a thoughtful smile. Do you remember the first night I told you everything? He asked. How could I forget? I said with a small laugh. I was terrified, he continued. But when you said you loved me no matter what, that's what gave me the courage to keep going. You saved me from myself. His words caught me off guard, and I felt a warmth spread through my chest. You saved yourself, I replied. I just stood beside you while you found your way. He stopped and looked at me, his eyes shining in the fading light. I couldn't have done it without you, he said softly. You believed in me before I even believed in myself. I reached up to touch his cheek, feeling the smoothness of his skin, the subtle softness that had emerged over the months. And I always will, I whispered. As the first stars appeared overhead, we continued our walk, our footsteps quiet but certain. The world around us might not always understand, but in that moment it didn't matter. We had each other, and we had the courage to face whatever lay ahead. Inside our small home later that night, Daniel stood before the mirror, dressed in a flowing lavender blouse that shimmered in the soft light. He turned slightly, examining the gentle curves of his reflection. For a long time, he simply stared, a quiet smile playing at the corners of his lips. I stepped behind him, wrapping my arms around his waist, and together we gazed at the person he had always been, now finally visible to the world. Summer arrived with long golden evenings and a sense of freedom that matched the rhythm of Daniel's transformation. By now, the physical changes were unmistakable. His chest had filled into a natural softness that needed no padding. His face had taken on a delicate balance of strength and grace, and his voice carried a warmth that felt both familiar and beautifully new. Sometimes I would catch myself staring at him across the room, struck not by how different he looked, but by how unmistakably himself he had become. Our daily life, though, remained grounded in simple routines. We still cooked dinner together, still argued over what movie to watch, still laughed at inside jokes no one else would understand. Yet everything felt charged with new meaning. Each small moment, The way he brushed his hair back from his face, the quiet pride in the way he buttoned a blouse, was a reminder of the courage it took to live openly. One humid evening, as we sat on the porch drinking iced tea, Daniel leaned back and sighed contentedly. "I've been thinking," he said, a playful glint in his eye, "about something I've wanted to do for a long time." I raised an eyebrow, curious. "Something big?" He smiled, almost shy. "Not huge, but important. I want to go shopping. Not online, not hiding behind a screen. I want to walk into a store, try things on, and leave with something that's mine." It was such a simple request, but I knew the courage it required. The thought of stepping into a brightly lit boutique, of facing strangers and potential stares, carried a weight that only someone who had hidden for years could understand. "Then let's do it," I said without hesitation. "We'll go together." The following Saturday, we drove to a small boutique downtown, one known for its welcoming atmosphere and inclusive staff. As we approached the entrance, I felt Daniel's hand tighten around mine. His breath came a little faster, but he didn't stop. The moment we stepped inside, the air filled with the soft scent of fabric and the gentle hum of conversation. A young sales associate greeted us with a warm smile and an easy, "Welcome. Let me know if you need any help." Daniel exhaled slowly, his shoulders easing. We began to browse, moving through racks of flowing dresses, delicate blouses, and soft knits. I watched as his eyes lit up, each piece of clothing an invitation to possibility. He carefully selected a few items and, after a quiet exchange with the associate, disappeared into the fitting room. I waited outside, my heart pounding with a mix of pride and anticipation. After a few minutes, the curtain rustled, and Daniel stepped out wearing a soft lavender sundress that seemed to capture the very essence of the season. The fabric hugged his form gently, the color complementing the warm glow of his skin. He looked radiant, not just because of the dress, but because of the quiet joy that lit his entire face. "What do you think?" he asked, turning slightly so I could see the way the dress flowed. My throat tightened with emotion. "I think it's perfect," I said honestly. "You look happy." He smiled, a brilliant, unguarded smile that told me everything I needed to know. We left the boutique with 2 carefully wrapped bags, Daniel clutching them with a pride that needed no words. On the drive home, he kept glancing at the bags, a soft laugh escaping every so often. "I can't believe I actually did that," he said, his voice a mix of wonder and disbelief. "You didn't just do it," I replied, squeezing his hand. "You owned it." That night, he tried on each piece again, twirling in front of the mirror as I sat cross-legged on the bed. We talked late into the night about how far he'd come, the secrecy of those early packages, the trembling confession in the dark, the careful first steps into the world. "Do you remember when you were afraid to even open those boxes in front of me?" "Yes." Daniel nodded, his eyes soft. "I remember feeling like I'd never be able to share this part of myself. And now," he trailed off, looking down at the lavender dress with a small smile, "now it feels like I'm finally alive." The next morning, we visited the small cafe where we had shared so many quiet milestones. This time, Daniel wore the lavender dress, his hair gently curled, a light touch of makeup highlighting the softness of his features. As we walked through the door, I felt a wave of pride so strong it nearly brought tears to my eyes. People glanced up, smiled, and returned to their conversations. No one whispered. No one stared. The world simply continued, and Daniel shone within it. Later that evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, we sat on the porch again, sipping tea and watching the fireflies flicker in the warm air. "Do you ever think about where this journey will take you?" I asked softly. Daniel leaned back, his gaze fixed on the fading horizon. "I think about it every day," he admitted. "But I've stopped trying to plan every step. For so long I lived in fear of the future. Now I just want to live in the truth of today." His words settled over us like the gentle night air, calm, certain, and full of quiet promise. I reached for his hand, feeling the steady pulse beneath his skin, and knew that whatever tomorrow held, We were ready to face it together. As the fireflies danced around us and the stars began to appear, I rested my head on his shoulder, overwhelmed by the beauty of the moment. This was more than transformation. It was a reclamation of life itself, a slow, courageous return to authenticity. And in that quiet summer evening, I felt an unshakable certainty that our love would continue to grow right alongside him, no matter how the seasons changed.